So in terms of seasons of life, how can they adapt to the different changing lifestyles? As initially it starts out as a temporary structure, but because of financial reasons or family growth, it's not possible to continue, to move on. So how can the structure adapt to that? Basically fostering a social lifestyle, but still having the ability to, exist as a temporary structure. Can it be something that responds to an emergency and then maybe is able to be disassembled and reassembled elsewhere to serve another temporary structure? And then we kind of went into materiality.
And then we just started talking about different cycles that would be moving through the project and looking at it, not just in terms of the cycle of the house, but cycles of, we talk about the people, cycles of knowledge, cycles of materials and money, and then just as the last one, cycle. I think those are all. But so looking at it as, in some ways there are these cycles that go through the house, and that the goal is to better those cycles as they pass through the house, almost like a filter or something. And so it improves the knowledge where it starts out, and then it improves it, and all those flows that go into the drawings, and then it improves them when they go into the build form, and then they improve it when it gets to the site. And so that the house serves to capture all these cycles better than.
And actually one of the reasons that, about talking about the cycles that we kind of got to this was the 1 week competition versus the big picture. What is the projection of our project when we're done with it? Once we get to that 1 week competition in DC, what happens then? Do we donate it? Do we use it for research? Do we disassemble it and learn from it and reuse some of the materials? And that's where this diagram kind of came in, talking about the origin of this project with the ideas and the people working through it, and then it actually comes onto paper, moves into 3D form, goes to DC for the competition. We actually talked about it as being maybe a prototype for the UMOR project or any sustainable development for that matter, but then actually continuing past that to serve as a resource for future developments. So you can show that progression. And along the way we talked about the process of monitoring this and how do we actually use the life cycle of it to feed and fuel the next generation. So we were talking about snapshots and monitoring and just evaluating kind of what we learned from each step of the process.
So those monitors would be gauging the people, the knowledge, the materials and money, and then just the environmental impact. So right now we're all working on trace using markers. What are the costs of those, and what are those in terms of environmental impacts as well? So monitoring those things at all stages, not just the final build product.
Goes rod and blood. I'm sorry. But you would monitor. Are you suggesting to monitor it after the project is done and actually live in it as a living laboratory and monitor it over a period of time?
Yep.
That would be the goal when it has its final destination at UMOR. So it would continue to monitor there and feed back into the 2011 proposal.
You could just mash it down into a big thing. It could be the foundation.
That was Derek's idea.
Instead we can make it out of aluminum and just crush it. And use it as a foundation for another.
Yeah.
And we also, when we're talking about the seasonality of life, that's for the house itself, the site on which it exists, and the inhabitants that actually, start to live in the house. Because how is that going to, enhance the life, the site, the context? How can the house and the structure actually perform that?
I think the idea of what the Solar D is after the competition, it is important because I know, not this competition, but I think the last one, Colorado or Virginia Tech, one of their design, whatever it was actually used by a developer, and they made like 200 units, or that was the plan last I checked, is that it actually had a life beyond the competition. And I think that's something that we would, pretty much have to integrate into whatever the design scheme becomes. And I mean, whatever that is, we don't know at this level, but I think that would be really important, because it seems that for designing sustainably, how are you going to design sustainably for one moment? That's the exact, opposite of what sustainability means. So I think that should be really integral to the whole design process.
And that's what Joe had kind of talked about when we asked about what was the experience that you just had when you were in DC. hence that the, whatever happens after DC has been something that's kind of the subscript, you know, that not really highlighted or
It's not the
embraced.
first thing you hear when you walk in. It's not, oh, our house is going to Montana after this. You find out that at the very end of the tour. And so if it's something where we can be like, well, we've been monitoring all this and like right in front. So it's almost like they're there to see our prototype for you more, not so much they're there to see our entry into the solar.
And for examples of the monitoring process, the Science House over at the Science Museum, the White Group has been monitoring that and collecting data over a period of time. So there are definitely models for taking that example, and the White Group's definitely interested in the partnership.
And I certainly think monitoring at this stage is something no one's even talked about in the competition. You know, everyone thinks post-occupancy, what we can monitor that. And if you're going to talk about life cycle and really try and make an impact in the future times that we do this, then this information is going to be really critical for the next group that does 2011, which is another thing that we saw in the competition. You know, Colorado, it's a new team every time, it's a new idea entirely. And so what can we really start building and getting out of this, not just the end use, but